California, and today is Thursday, the 25th of February 2021. I want to welcome you all to this broadcast. I want to welcome you all for tuning in. I want to thank you for giving of your time. Folks, you know, yesterday there was a very disturbing development, and it wasn't the demise of Tiger Woods, okay? The news has used the Tiger Woods cover story to hide the dry run on the Federal Reserve shutdown yesterday. The Federal Reserve interbank system allegedly went down for several hours because of an alleged glitch, right? Okay. Now, first of all, folks, I don't know if any of you who have seen Ocean's 11. I don't know if any of you have seen the remake of the movie Ocean's 11. But, you know, the Las Vegas casinos have vaults that they keep everybody's money in after they've lost it all. And those security systems that protect those vaults, they have several layers of redundancy, okay? They don't have breaches in security in Vegas. They don't have breaches in continuity at the Federal Reserve. You see, the Federal Reserve Bank is a private bank. It's illegal. It actually was one of the reasons the Titanic was sunk. Okay, James Pierpont Morgan had a record insurance policy on the ship that was previously damaged and swapped out for another one. And long and short of it, there were a bunch of people on that ship coming over from Europe that were trying to stop the creation of the Federal Reserve on Jekyll Island during the Christmas recess that year. And what happened was that ship was blown up and sunk, and along with it, a lot of the people that could have had an ability to stop that establishment of the illegal central bank that has pretty much destroyed the United States. And by the way, we've got a Schofield reference Bible in the possession of all these Christian pastors that teach this end times premillennial dispensationalism, this eschatological geopolitical ploy playing on all your fears so a geopolitical narrative can occupy the current political landscape and get a pass, which was written by a man who called himself a reverend. His name was C.I. Schofield. And this guy walked out on his wife and children on his farm, abandoned his family, literally left them for dead, and hitched his horse to a New York who happened to be the federal representative that wrote the Federal Reserve Act, right? So you've got the people that guided the inspired notes of this fraudulent Bible translation hanging out with the guy that wrote the Federal Reserve Act, right? And so the Federal Reserve, ladies and gentlemen, just so you understand, by the way, you know, none of your Ron Pauls or Donald Trumps or Joe Bidens or any of these circus clowns that call themselves statesmen will ever try to get rid of the Federal Reserve, right? Ron Paul says, oh, we got to audit the Fed. Folks, how do you audit a fraudulent institution that's unconstitutionally illegal? How do you do that? Well, you don't. You either get rid of it or you leave it alone. We know Ron Paul was a Jesuit fraud working for the cabal. And, you know, he was there just to absorb the grassroots momentum, give people a little false hope, and people assumed he was going to do the heavy lifting, right? Remember the Ron Paul revolution, audit the Fed? No, end the Fed. The Federal Reserve takes special paper and runs it through a special printing press and creates money. And they make us sweat for it, right? They make us slave for it. And then when we give our hard-earned time and talent to either our business or our employer or whatever endeavor we're in for commerce, then they come back and take a chunk out of it called income tax to pay the debt on the money that is printed out of thin air by a private bank that is then loaned to our government at interest, right? Tell me you could not come up with a bigger counterfeiting scheme than that. Let me repeat this, because all of you people that work for the school district, that work for the college district, that work for all of these civic organizations, that think you've done our society a service by educating the youth, you've done nothing but lied to them and hidden one of the most intricate mysteries that is so simple to figure out for such a long time that it's where we find ourselves now, and that is at their mercy, right? The Federal Reserve is a private bank. It's a central bank. The only entity in the United States government that is authorized to coin or issue currency is the Congress. Well, then how is it that the Federal Reserve Act was passed and allowed a central bank to issue money on behalf of itself and then loan it to the government at interest? And then the government loans it to banks and the Federal Reserve loans it to banks at interest, right? And so there's several layers of interest by the time you get your hands on a debt note called the Federal Reserve note. And so there's no way it'll ever be paid back. And now what happened is this munchkin guy under Trump just ran the presses like nobody's business and inflated the money supply. I think upwards of $10 trillion he printed. And so, you know, now we've got a situation where we've got, you know, the Weimar currency on our hands pretty soon. And it may take a wheelbarrow of $20 bills to get a loaf of bread at some point. And no, we're not going into a deflationary depression, folks. You know, on the Chupacabra channel, like George Norrie and his circus clown guests he brings on there, telling us how prices of everything are going to drop. And we're going into deflationary depression. No, we're not. How is it that when you have, you know, 300-400 million people living in a geographic region known as the United States, and there's nothing to eat in the majority of the country, there's nothing being made in the majority of the country, and yet people have by and large, the population has created a system of what is referred to in economics as inelastic demand for certain commodities like food, gasoline, without, right? And things that we literally have to import, right? Most of our food's imported, most of our petroleum's imported, and building supplies by and large are being imported, right? Aside from the lumber, but my point is we're not going into a situation where stuff's going to get cheaper. The more money they print, the more money is out there chasing the goods and services, commoditizing goods and services. Housing has been commoditized. In other words, there's a ton of money chasing the available housing. So that puts upward pressure on rents and home prices, prices people out of the market, keeps people trapped in poverty. Isn't this great how they keep printing money and handing it out like lollipops on Halloween? No, it impoverishes a nation. And as a byproduct, which is actually the sinister goal of agents of the cabal, that is to get us into a point of so much debt that they can foreclose on us and take everything. They can take the forests, they can take the fisheries, they can take the minerals, they can take the land, they can take the natural resources, they can take the human resources. That's why you're all registered as a commodity with the Department of Commerce when you're born. The Tiger Woods cover story for what happened yesterday is just that. It's just, they were running a test. The central bank called the Federal Reserve of the United States. The Central Bank of the United States. Can you guys hear me okay? I got a note here that there's no sound. Can you guys hear me okay? Are we muted? Are we doing okay? The sound is back. Okay, so what's happening is we are now fully dependent on a private bank run by a board of governors that aren't elected by the people of the United States. They're appointed by the people we elect, and actually the people that you think are elected are actually selected. So we've got basically a dictatorial financial regime out of the reach and accountability of the people of the United States. And consequently, they can manipulate interest rates, they can inflate or constrict the money supply. And if they want to induce a depression, they just raise interest rates and constrict or restrict the money supply. And so there is not enough currency out there to purchase goods and services. And people become impoverished and they starve to death. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the Wizard of Oz, but there was a period in the United States where we tried to go to a gold standard and people starved to death because there wasn't enough gold available. Abraham Lincoln tried to do something. He created these greenback notes that weren't a central bank note. They were issued by the Congress. And of course, the people that wanted the central bank made sure that he got lead in the head, right? Kennedy started printing United States notes in the denomination of $5 bills. And he got a lead in the head. Or did he? All we know is he was taken out of the picture. He allegedly was shot by a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald that was busy centrifuging SV40 virus extracts from diseased monkeys and flushing them down the toilets, right? And he obviously was able to get Kennedy with a bolt-action rifle from, you know, the 10th floor in a moving car, right? You guys ever shot a bolt-action rifle at a moving car from that distance without a scope? And so, yeah, then, you know, he's in custody. They frame him and they take him in, right? And then what happens? Jack Rubenstein, right? Jack Rubenstein shows up and gives him a lead to the head, right? Rubenstein. His name's not Jack Ruby. His name was Jack Rubenstein. So they got rid of their suspect. Dead men tell no tales, right? And they ended up getting rid of Jack Rubenstein, too. But the point is that Kennedy tried to get us out of the Federal Reserve, and they took him out. Reagan hinted at getting us out of the Federal Reserve, and he almost got a lead to the head, but instead we got the Brady Bill, right? Big gun control law of that whole fiasco, right? It had nothing to do with Jodie. The whole thing had nothing to do with Jodie Foster, folks. Come on, these are all cover stories. And the Bush family was in Dealey Plaza the day of the Kennedy assassination. This whole thing has been, you know, there's a certain element of involvement of certain crime families that continues in a generational, multi-generational pattern to this day. But what happened yesterday was they ran a little test to shut the money supply off and see, they just want to shut down for a couple hours. They don't have computer failures at the Federal Reserve, folks. The Bellagio Casino in Las Vegas does not have security breaches in their vault, okay? They don't have power failures that allow people to jump all over the tables and steal all the chips, folks. They've got several backup power systems. They've got all kinds of security. Folks, the Federal Reserve has all kinds of computer redundancies in place, fail-safes, if you will. It was a test, ladies and gentlemen. It was a test, okay? I like that term, a conspiracy realist, because you know what, folks? If you look up the definition of a conspiracy, conspiracies are actually what are going on right now. Now, a theorist is somebody who is making up his own conspiracies, but a conspiracy realist is someone who understands the conspiracies and explains them in exactly the way they were planned and executed, right? And so we're in a situation now where we are at the mercy of a central bank controlled by the deniers of Jesus Christ who seek to starve us to death, who seek to destroy our country and to enslave and exterminate us so they can have a world of their own. And that's their plan. Because what they've done is they've gotten us to this point in about 100 years' time, to where every aspect of our daily life is dependent upon the availability of their Kool-Aid coinage called a Federal Reserve note. And they can take them away from us. They can take them and make them worth less. They can take them and make them worth more. They can take them and stop the flow, because now most money is digital. They can take your bank account and devalue it and say, okay, well, you have $10,000 in the bank and now it's only worth $2,000, because we had to confiscate 80% of it to pay the debt, the interest on the debt. You see, folks, when the United States government keeps borrowing money from a private bank, it eventually has to pay it back, right? Have you ever gotten into trouble with your credit cards? Well, I remember when I was young and I was in college, I was broke. I didn't have any money. I remember going to school. I remember, I'm not kidding you, folks, I would photocopy books at the library at UCI because I could not afford the $80 to $100 books. I had to go photocopy them for $8. I was working in restaurants and barely keeping I had a 74 Datsun pickup, folks, right back when I was in college. And if it wasn't the head gasket or the oil slinger in the timing cover, if it wasn't the alternator, if it wasn't the brake master cylinder, if it wasn't the wheel cylinders leaking, if it wasn't an issue with the electrical system, it was always something keeping the car on the road, and getting to school every day was a feat that was really something. Keeping a car on the road that always had problems. And so I didn't have any money, folks. If I had money when I was going to college, I would not have been driving a piece of junk that used to break down. I mean, I used to have to run the heater in this truck when I'd go on long trips in the summer. I remember taking my girlfriend down to this place called Campland down in San Diego. I don't know, how old was I? Let me see, let's do a little math here. I was probably 19, had a nice tent, and I had a piece of junk aluminum boat with a outboard on it. And I dragged this boat down to a place to go camp, take my girlfriend, spend a week down there, take the boat out and go fishing, and come back and barbecue the barracuda for breakfast. And folks, I would have to drag this boat with firewood and all the gear, and I'd be driving south on the 5 freeway, and I used to have to run the heater so the car wouldn't overheat. Now, do you know what that's like in the summer, running the heater when it's 95 degrees outside? It's not fun. And I had a Weber carburetor on it. It didn't have a catalytic converter. It smelled, right? A lot of pollution, right? My point, folks, is that it was tough. There was no money. I had to make do. All right. We're in a situation right now where they could take away all of your purchasing power, and some of you are literally paycheck to paycheck. And the point of this broadcast is not to make light of your demise, but rather to advise you to be wise in terms of how you deal with this information and how you prepare for what lies ahead. Let me tell you what's going to lie ahead, folks. Massive shortages of goods, okay? Namely food, all right? A little history on the United States, aside from what I've already delved into here. After World War II, the United States got itself in a position of preeminence through the Bretton Woods Agreement, which basically, in a nutshell, gave the United States dollar the power to be the unique currency in which oil was traded, right? And so consequently, no matter how many dollars they printed, they were still worth what they wanted them to be worth. The United States dollar was the strongest currency all over the world for the longest time because of the Bretton Woods Agreement, because of the requirement that all oil trades be denominations. And so that's the reason why for $5 you can go a sack of rice. That's why for $5 US you can get a sack of beans. That's why for $5 US in Central America you can get a sack of bananas. Even though they can print all the money they want, it still gets you a sack of beans or a sack of rice. Now, if you go to some of these other countries that print all the money they want, that money is not going to get you a sack of beans or a sack of rice. You're going to need a sack of rice to get a sack of beans, or perhaps your daughter to get a sack of beans. I don't know. But none of these other countries are able to inflate their money supply like the United States, because their currency is not pegged to the oil trade. We are already on the downward slope descent into losing that preeminence and status as a nation and its currency, because the sun is setting on the dollar. Now, that's a foregone conclusion. They're winding that down. They've been winding it down. That's why a house costs $300,000 in Tennessee now, when they used to cost, $65,000 not too long ago, because the dollar is losing its value. And it's going to continue to lose its value. And what's really scary is they've demonstrated to us that not only is the money losing its value, but also its ability to freely flow through institutions into your hands is also at risk. Because for the first time, they flexed their muscle and shut down the Federal Reserve interbank transfer system. Okay? In other words, have any of you ever bought a car? I bought a car. I bought a car before this car that I'm driving. I don't mind telling you, it's 27 years old. I think I paid $4,000 or $5,000 for the thing, and I had to go to a bank and I had to wire the money to this guy out of state, right? And what I did is I filled out this form, and the bank did an electronic or digital transfer of $4,000 to this guy's bank account. And that's an interbank transfer that the Federal Reserve is literally not only the entity that produces the money, it's also the entity that controls the flow of the money. In other words, they run the pipelines through which the money is transferred. Think about them controlling the water supply and the water delivery system. We're at that much mercy to the entity of the Federal Reserve, folks. They could literally shut our economy down tomorrow, and a lot of people will starve to death. I'm going to get right into the point, folks. You need to start preparing for a long-term plan in case you don't have any money or don't have any access to money. And you know what? I know people who've spent their whole life amassing millions of dollars, and they are deathly afraid right now of what can happen to the wealth that they've greedily stashed away, right? The Bible talks about the love of money is the root of all evil, and the Bible also talks about how it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but I will tell you that to whom much is given, much is required. And when you got a ton of dough, you can get yourself in a boatload of trouble, okay? You need to get your hands on things that will not lose their value, that will be able to be consumed or traded and stored for a very long period of time. I'm not selling anything, folks, but I am telling you that you really should start stocking up on storable food, and stop throwing away your old shoes and the clothes your kids don't fit into anymore, because your grandkids may need them and they may not be available someday. Okay, I'm not telling you to be a hoarder. I'm telling you not to be wasteful. And if you have a pair of pants that was worn by your 8-year-old son, there's a good chance in the next few years that somebody you know is going to have an 8-year-old son that's going to need that pair of shoes. Okay, so don't throw things in the trash that can be used by somebody else or even your own family, because number one, the money may not be there to purchase it when the time comes. Oh, well, I'll just go get new ones. It's $8. The reason why you can get a sweater for $8 at one of these retail stores is because the labor in Bangladesh is producing it for 10 cents an hour, and they're still accepting U.S. currency to put those garments on a cargo ship in a shipping container and have it come through the port. Listen to me, folks. If our money supply stops or our currency collapses, nobody's going to ship us anything. And we're going to be an island, an oasis, and they've deindustrialized us, and they've taken away a large majority of our ability to produce food. You need to be in a situation to where You don't have to go to the store every single day, okay? You need to be in a situation where if you're held up in your house or your farm or wherever you are, you need to be able to just stay there and not have to get into a line to get a vaccine, to get into a line to have something shoved up your nose and implanted in your brain, okay? My point is that they are starting to run their tests on the next phase of the lockdown. And the next phase of the lockdown will be a currency lockdown, will be a money supply lockdown, okay? There will come a time where everything that you thought you could use to spend the rest of the life, you know, cruising around in luxury in a $150,000 car, first class flights, you know, all these folks, I've seen people spend $1,000 on dinner, okay? I would never do such a thing. You know, folks, I'll be honest with you, when my wife and I go for our anniversary, I think like $100 is the limit, right? That's like once a year, okay? Folks, there are people out there that spend $1,000 on a bottle of wine with dinner. Those days are gone, okay? They're taking everybody down. The human cattle have no status with the deniers, okay? They're going to get rid of everybody as they can to the best of their ability that isn't Monopoly when you're young. And then, okay, I remember we played, my brothers and I, we'd be playing, and I'd have Park Place and Boardwalk, and I'd have hotels. And, oh, it says, okay, Joey, it's time to go to bed. Come on, fold it up. Wait a minute, I'm winning. Too bad. Time to stop. Time to fold up the table. And you have to take all your money. Everybody throws it in the back, and they put it all back into the bank, and it's gone, right? That's where we're at. I wish it wasn't so, folks. I wish it wasn't so. I'm not going to tell you to go out and exchange everything for gold and silver because, you know, someone will come to your house with a gun and steal it, right? I'm telling you that there is no place to put your faith and trust except in Jesus Christ, and make provision according to how your Heavenly Father guides you. I mean, folks, go to Home Depot and spend $3 on a bucket on a lid, go to the Dollar Tree, and, you know, spend, $10 on 10 bags of beans, dump them in the bucket, and go online and spend, I don't know, $5 for a bag of oxygen absorbers, and start storing beans, start storing rice, start buying some canned meat. You know, try to stay away from the canned meat that has like sodium nitrite in it and stuff. Folks, you've got to start looking long term, because if they restrict the money supply or they shut it down like they did in the Great Depression, there won't be any food, there won't be any soap, there won't be any rope, okay? Folks, I'm telling you, we're going into a very dark period of time, and the handwriting is on the wall, okay? And don't tell me not to eat beans, folks. Come on. You got to eat something. You got to have protein. You got to have fat. You know, buy that, what do they call that, the jarred butter? You know, you can live on potatoes and butter, okay? You need to understand that their plan is to just keep us literally at the mercy of the technocratic society of accoutrements and comfort. And they are going to pull the rug out from under us. Everything we've gone through right now. Yeah, it's ghee. Thank you for pointing that out. You can buy that. It's got tremendous shelf life. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. It has all your fats and vitamin A and essential fatty acids. GHEE. Go out and buy a jar or two of that. Three jars, 4 jars, whatever. Put it somewhere. Use it. Okay? You can grow potatoes in barrels in the dark in your basement, folks. I mean, do some homework. Stop living like a Pavlovian-trained rat in a medical experimentation lab, because that's what we are finding ourselves in the situation of right now. They've gotten us to that point, okay? You need to start preparing for the unthinkable, and that is a world that we've never experienced before, okay? The world that we've never experienced before is one in which we can't get whatever we want, whenever we want, as long as we have money to buy it. Folks, number one, it may not be available. Number two, you may not have any access to any money. They may freeze your accounts. Do some homework on what happened to Argentina, folks, in the 80s. And it's not Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. Evita Peron, the musical, had nothing to do with what really went down over there. The IMF called their loans. And they collateralized all of the national infrastructure, and they went from eating at an Outback Steakhouse and having a glass of wine on Friday night to mobs of people rocking over the cattle trucks and ripping the meat off the live animals with their hands and their knives. People start starving over there. Children were being sent to school with rock soup. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding, folks. We could find ourselves. Their plan is to bring us to that point. And you've seen with this COVID-19 psychological military operation, psychological warfare military operation drill that they've been running, they flexed their muscles. Look at me. Look at me. I want to show you something. You see this? They flexed their muscles. All right? They shut down the commerce, they shut down the travel, they shut down the information, they shut down medical freedom, they shut down communications, they shut down the right of assembly, they shut down the right of worship, they shut down the right to freely interact and congregate. Listen to me, folks. They flexed their muscles during this drill, all right? They're flexing their muscles now on the financial shutdown, okay? Anybody that's out there telling you to prep is on the right side, folks. This is not a prepping channel. Do you understand me? This is not a prepping channel. This is just a channel that talks about good ideas on how to protect yourself. I'm not here to sell you anything. I don't have anything for sale, folks. I'm just warning all of you because, like I continuously say, number one, it is my duty as a Christian to tell everybody who Jesus is, what he did, and why he did what he did so we can do what we have to do, all right? Number two, it's going to be a better outcome for all of us the more people that are prepared for what is coming. Because if more people are prepared, the less likely we are to fall victim and succumbing to the mass hysteria and chaos they plan to induce, okay? And that's why I do what I do, folks. I don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of unprepared, desperate, psychotic people. Okay, I want to be surrounded by people that are calm, level-headed, and Christian. And you want to know something, folks? There ain't no atheists in a foxhole. And let me tell you something. We're going to end up in a foxhole pretty soon the way things are going because we are under attack. Listen, you have all these opportunities to fill up all these bottles with water. Whether you drink soda, whether you drink beer, whether you use bleach, whether you use windshield wiper fluid, I don't care. There's all kinds of bottles you can store water in. Okay, there's all kinds of places you can go and buy cheap canned goods. Canned goods, let me tell you something, folks. I'll tell you a little story before I hang up here, okay? I lived down at the beach for a while with a buddy of mine, old fishing pal. He had a place down on the Balboa Peninsula on Balboa Boulevard. Really cool pad. You know, the front porch was right on the street, and there'd always people walking by, girls walking by. Summertime, great place to live. Literally right across the street's the ocean, right? Well, the house behind him in the alley was owned by this really wealthy old man, and he died. And his house, I don't know, at the time was worth millions of dollars. Right on the waterfront, had a boat slip and everything. And the daughter and her husband had begun to move all his stuff out and started throwing all his stuff out. And I noticed that there were these really weird-looking brown cans, and it almost reminded me of something from a Twilight Zone episode after a nuclear attack. They went into this cave and saw these cans, and I realized that these cans were very, very old. And I asked the daughter what they were. She goes, "Oh, these are smoked salmon from a trip that, you know, he did back, 20 years ago, 25 years ago in Alaska." She goes, "That stuff's no good." So I said, "Okay." So I took one, and I went back to my place and sat on the patio outside, popped this can open, and it was this black peppered smoked salmon. And I smelled it, and it smelled good. I tasted it, and it was delicious. I ate a few pieces of it, and I waited to see if it affected me. And the next day, nothing, no burping, no repeating on me, nothing. So I went back and got all these cans of this smoked salmon out of the trash, okay? This smoked salmon was probably 25 years old. And I kid you not, folks, I had some of this smoked salmon up until a few years ago. That stuff was 30 years in the can, and it was still good, okay? My point is, folks, don't be afraid of hanging on to things. And, obviously don't eat stuff that's spoiled. You can tell and taste if something's bad. Folks, get prepared, please. Don't fall victim to your addiction to comfort and lack of preparation, okay? Things are heading our way that aren't good. That's why I'm here. That's why we're talking on that. We're talking about this. And folks, Don't be afraid, because Jesus paid it all. He paved the way. He's the way out. Eternity awaits us. We've been given. I know some of you still struggle. You know what? All of us struggle. Even I struggle. I get mad. I yell. My wife gets mad at me because I yell. She hates it when I yell on this channel, and she gets mad at me. She goes, I can't stand it when you yell. Then I get emails from people saying, I love your yelling. So, folks, I'm sick of it! Okay? I'm sick of being weaponized COVIDians. How's that? Get prepared. Get ready. Because we don't know what's ahead, but we do know something's coming, and it ain't good. This is Joe Imbriano, the Fullerton Informer. P.O. Box 4121, Fullerton, California, 92834. On the web at thefullertoninformer.com, WiFiDangers.com, CellTowerDangers.com, and VaxDangers.com. The Bible says we're not supposed to yell. Then does the Bible say that Jesus was wrong when he went into the temple and broke out that whip? Do you think Jesus was, when he went into the temple and he broke out the whip the first time, do you think he's like, okay, guys, I think you should stop doing this because it's really not right? Or do you think he went in there and started whipping those people and throwing things all over the place and say, you guys are a bunch of crooks! Get out of my Father's house! You've made it a den of thieves! What do you think Jesus did, right? You know the church you went to telling you that you can't have righteous anger? It's a weaponized church. Get out of it. Folks, take care in Jesus' name. And in Jesus' manner shall we go. Take care.